This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. I see the grease all over you. You don't shine quite the same. Growing up spoils that, I guess. It's Dr. Sleep, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. Sorry we're a little late on this episode. There's some stuff going on.
Lots of things happening
and
right
by
now.
Stuff, I mean, it's our wedding week. If you're listening to this when this episode comes out, we're getting married in like 4 days. So we're a little busy. So we got lots going on. So yeah, that's why this episode's a little bit late.
Also, if I sound tired, I am.
Yes, we like I said, we got a lot going on, but we're excited to talk about this because this is a fun, at least for me, this is a fun movie. So let's get right into it with all of our segments, and we'll start like we always do with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Dr. Sleep by Stephen King takes place over a few decades, following Dan Torrance as he works to overcome his demons from his childhood trauma in the Overlook Hotel, as well as the resulting alcoholism. Dan ends up living in a small town in New Hampshire where he attends AA meetings and works as an orderly at the local hospice and gains a reputation for helping patients cross into death peacefully. A little girl, Abra Stone, who lives in a nearby town and also possesses The Shining, makes psychic contact with him off and on over the years. The novel also follows a nomadic cult of vampire-like individuals known as the True Knot, who murder and feed off of children who shine in order to unnaturally elongate their lives, which they call steam. They are led by Rose the Hat. When Abra unwittingly witnesses them brutally torture and murder a boy in Iowa, the True Knot are alerted to her presence but don't know who she is. 2 years later, Abra stumbles across his picture in an ad for missing children and tries to use her powers to find out where his body is. This causes her to accidentally go into Rose the Hat's mind, putting a target on her back. Abra meets Dan in person for the first time and convinces him to help her. Dan and his friends Billy, who also shines a little, and Dr. John, who knows about Abra's powers, drive to Iowa and find the murdered boy's body, as well as his baseball glove, which Abra thinks she can use to locate the True Knot. Meanwhile, the True Knot decides to accelerate their plan to abduct Abra because taking steam from the boy in Iowa caused them to contract the measles, which is quickly taking down their numbers. They believe that her steam will cure them. Dan, Billy, Dr. John, and Abra convince her father of what's going on and make a plan to take out the True Knot abduction party. Abra projects her psychic presence to a campground while she's safe at home, but the adults are lying in wait and kill the members of the cult that show up thinking Abra will be there. However, she slips up once, causing one of the cult members, Crow Daddy, to go to her home instead. He kidnaps her and Billy, who is keeping watch outside the house. Dan uses his powers to shine into Abra and helps her take out Crow Daddy by crashing the truck and then forcing him to turn his gun onto himself. Abra and Billy hide at a motel while the other adults bring Abra's mother into the plot. Meanwhile, Abra's great-grandmother has been dying of cancer and Dan helps her cross, also gaining something from her that will be important later. We also find out that Dan and Abra's mother are half-siblings, as Dan's father Jack had an affair with her grandmother when she was his student. Together, the group makes a plan to take out the remaining members of the True Knot once and for all. Abra calls Rose and taunts her, saying that she's coming to kill her. The remaining members of the cult are camped out at the location where the Overlook once stood, having been attracted to its evil. Dan and Billy drive cross-country, and when they arrive in Colorado, Abra uses astral projection to fool the sick and dying cult members into thinking that she's actually there. Dan releases Abra's great-grandmother's death steam and kills everyone except for Rose and one other member, who is eventually killed by the ghost of Horace Derwent, who Dan releases from the prison in his mind. Dan and Abra fight Rose, and with the help of the ghost of Jack Torrance, push her off a cliff, and she falls to her death. The novel ends with Dan becoming a mentor to Abra as she grows further into her powers.
Okay, so for the film, take everything Katie said up until the part where Dan gets Crow Daddy to crash his truck. And that's all roughly the same, barring some details. Then we're going to take it up from there because that's where the film really kind of changes. And in the film, basically what happens here is that after he rescues her from Crow Daddy, he realizes that Rose is going to keep coming after Abra, so he takes her to the Overlook. Also at this point, everybody else is dead. We'll get to this. Billy's dead. Her father, or Abra's father, is dead. So it's just, and her mom is not in the picture. Well, at least is not involved in the plot. So we'll get to that eventually. But so basically what happens is that Danny takes Abra to the Overlook, which is still standing in the film universe, because this is based on the film, as kind of like a last resort, final stand type of thing, believing that the Overlook will be as dangerous for Rose as it is for anybody else that enters there. When they get there, he goes into the hotel, Danny does, and starts up the hotel, awakening it. He starts the boiler and starts awakening the whole hotel with his shining. And at the same time, we get flashbacks to visions of The Shining, to his childhood in the hotel. Rose then arrives at the Overlook and gets into a fight with Dan and Abra, but is able to overpower Dan, but he eventually is able to save himself by opening the lockboxes in his mind and releasing all of the Overlook's ghosts. Drawn by Rose's powers, the ghosts overwhelm and devour her before turning on Danny and possessing him in a bid to try to make him kill Abra. After a moment where she cuts through his possessed mind, he tells her to save herself before the hotel overcomes him again. He then goes to the boiler room. The ghosts have him go to the boiler room to try to stop the boiler room from exploding and destroying the hotel. But Dan is able to regain control of himself enough to keep himself from and to let the boiler go off and explode. As he's dying, which by this time his femoral artery has been punctured by an axe. He was going to die anyways. He's like bleeding out at this point. But as he's dying in front of the boiler, he sees a vision of himself as a child, or not even really. This is what I'm reading from Wikipedia to kind of get this summary quickly. I would say he doesn't see a vision of himself as a child. I would say that we, the viewers, see
him as a child.
Or I guess you could say it's him. We're maybe seeing through his whatever. We see him as a child being comforted by his mother in the hotel, and then the hotel explodes, or doesn't explode, but it catches fire. The boiler catches fire, and the hotel burns down. Abra escapes and watches it burn as the police arrive. Sometime later, Abra speaks to Dan's spirit, which we initially think it might be him, but no, it's actually his spirit, assuring him that she's fine. He comforts her, telling her to shine on and to not hide her gifts from the world. And then she tells her mother that she has been conversing with both Dan and her deceased father, and that both of them are okay. Later, as they're going down to dinner, Abra sees Mrs. Massey, the ghost in the bathtub from the Overlook Hotel, is in her bathroom, and she walks into the bathroom, shuts the door, and the film ends, implying that she's going to box the Overlook ghost. Just, do what Dan did earlier. So, again, roughly the same up until the point where Crow Daddy is killed and they go to the Overlook, and that's where it differs. We'll get into some of those differences here momentarily, but before that, Katie has some Guess Who's. We're going to play Guess Who for the first time in a little while.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay.
All right, first up, it was a guy who looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s, wearing a padded denim jacket and a red checked hunting cap with the ear flaps down.
I have no idea. This is so generic and nothing. I mean, I assume this is not Danny. Because the hunting cap. This could the person to me that this would make the most sense to me would be Billy, because we know Billy hunts. The 50s or 60s is probably a little older than Billy is in the film, but could make sense. And a padded denim jacket, he kind of wears like, plaid and denim and stuff that seems to fit. And the hunting cap, again, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that maybe he's also a hunter or previously was a hunter. There's a story about it in the film. Previously was a hunter, and so he has a hunting cap. Because I can't think of anybody else that would make sense for this. I can think of other people. It could be like Crow Daddy or something, but there's just so little here that I'm thinking this is Billy.
It is Billy.
Okay.
Yeah, they aged him down pretty significantly for the movie.
I would maybe like 10 years or so. Like, that actor's in his 40s.
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. But yeah, they aged him down a little bit for sure.
Masses of black hair framed her perfect, somehow arrogant face and streamed down her shoulders. Staying in place on this wealth of hair in spite of the crazy angle at which it was cocked was a jaunty top hat of scuffed velvet.
Well, this feels pretty straightforward that this is Rose the Hat.
Yeah, it was a bit of a gimme.
Yeah.
But,
she does not wear a jaunty angle in the film.
Doesn't.
She wears it very flat.
Yeah, it's one of the recurring motifs in the book is that she wears her hat at like such an angle that it looks like it shouldn't be able to sit that way.
Yeah.
It's like part of her magic powers.
Yeah. Occasionally in the film it might be tilted down a little bit, like forward, but it's never like at a crazy angle. Yeah. It's just sitting on her head.
It's also kind of a short top hat in the movie.
Yeah, it's not a very tall top hat. I'm sure that type of hat she's wearing has a specific name. I just don't know.
Probably, yeah. I don't know names of hats.
No.
Except for Rose the Hat. I know that one. Anyway, he looked about 35, his hair dead black and combed away from his forehead, his face angular but handsome in a rough-hewn, bony way.
Okay, well, I'm going to assume that this, although he would have been aged up slightly maybe in the film, but the hair, the dead black hair, and the angular face that is rough-hewn, handsome in a rough-hewn, bony way, the character that immediately jumps to my mind would be Crow Daddy.
Yeah, it is Crow Daddy.
Yeah. Which I believe that actor is indigenous in the film, but
it's never said in the book. I don't think that that Crow Daddy is indigenous, but it's strongly implied.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
All right, last one. She was tall for her age, most of that height in her legs. Masses of curly blonde hair were held back in a thick ponytail that looked ready to rebel and spray everywhere. Pretty but not beautiful. Except for her wide-set blue eyes. They were beautiful.
Okay, so I could go two ways here. Tall for her age means she's at least a little bit younger. Masses of curly blonde hair. Pretty but not beautiful, except for her wide-set blue eyes. They were beautiful. So here's my thinking. The two characters that one character immediately jumps to mind, although it doesn't really look anything like her, would be Andy, what is her name?
Snakebite Andy.
Snakebite Andy in the film, who I don't think they ever say exactly how old she is, but she's youngish.
She's 15 in the film.
She's 15. No, she tells people she's 15. She's not actually 15.
I thought she was.
Maybe I misinterpreted it. I thought she told people she was like, because she's like going after pedophiles. I thought, or at least that seemed to be the implication in the film, is that she's like killing pedophiles.
Yeah.
And so I thought she told people that she was 15, but she's actually like in her 20s or something. And just looks young or something.
I thought she was supposed to be like
It's possible. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know. I know there's one conversation about her age, and I thought somebody says like, how old are you? And she says, I can't remember now.
I don't remember.
Anyways, but that would be the first one that jumped to mind. The second one, which I think I'm going to make my guess, is that this is actually Abra, and that Abra was white in the book. Or maybe not white necessarily, but the curly blonde hair and blue eyes, you would assume. So I'm going to say that this is Abra, and that they did not cast a white girl as Abra in the film.
It is Abra.
Nailed it.
And they did not cast a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl in the film.
Yeah. Nailed. I got all 4 of those, didn't I?
You did.
Ha! All right. That's it for Guess Who. I have a bunch of questions, and we're going to find out if that was in the book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
Segment's called Was That in the Book, but whatever. Does Rebecca Ferguson's character wear the sweet hat? Obviously, this has been answered already. I answered it in the film because, or I already had the answer in the film like immediately because after she's introduced and I was like, was that hat a thing in the book? And then like 5 minutes later, she's like, my name is Rose the Hat or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, I imagine that if her name is Rose the Hat, she probably wears a hat like that in the book. So obviously it comes from the book. And we've talked about the jauntiness of it, but boy, I thought she looked so silly she's a very good character and a very like intimidating antagonist. And I thought she was great, but her look every time I see her, I was like, it just kind of made me laugh.
Yeah, she does wear a top hat in the book. It's certainly a choice. It actually looks less silly than what I imagined.
Well, especially because if it had been all jaunty, it would have been.
Yeah, because she wears it at a jaunty angle all the time, and they talk about it being a tall top hat, like at several points. So if she had been wearing like an Abraham Lincoln like stovepipe top hat, I think that would have looked even sillier. But who am I to say, I suppose.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that I think works about it, and I had a note about this later, but I'll just talk about it here, is there's this one shot in particular, the one where she's astral projecting, where the camera pushes into her face, into her eyes, and then pulls back out, and she's like floating through space now.
Mm-hmm.
And in that scene, when the camera pushes into her eyes and starts pulling back, I was vividly reminded of, and it's a film I haven't actually even seen, I just know a lot of the imagery from it, of A Clockwork Orange, of Malcolm McDowell's character in A Clockwork Orange. And I think that works for that. But that being said, like her whole aesthetic in the film, she felt like, it was like I was like, the hat and everything about her, it was like looking at somebody like dressing up as a rock star, like, or something
Yeah, she's got a very kind of like eccentric crunchy vibe,
like a bohemian rocker, like kind of like Janis Joplin or something, but like in a way that just felt, and maybe it works, like, again, I think she's a really interesting, like, good villain, but it's just like and maybe that juxtaposition of like the aesthetic versus how like evil she is kind of works, but it's just, I don't know, it was always very funny to me every time
I found her look like more interesting in the film than what's described in the book, because we actually get quite a bit of description of their clothes in the book, and they're always wearing like random like promotional t-shirts because they're supposed to look like unassuming and like blend in with other people who RV across the country. So, like, every time we are introduced to a member of the True Knot, Stephen King tells us what their t-shirt says, which is interesting.
There's at least a couple times in the movie where she's wearing, like, I never paid close enough attention to see what it was, but it looked like a band t-shirt or something, like some sort of, like, graphic tee or whatever. There's a couple times in the film where I noticed that. But other times she's just wearing more, again, sort of like flowy, like
kind of hippie
type of clothing. Which again, overall, I think it works. But I don't know. I kept going back and forth about whether or not I liked it, and I sometimes I really liked it, and sometimes I thought it just like I was literally like chuckling, and I thought it looked silly. So I don't know. Mixed feelings on the hat. This is something I was not expecting in the film. Is that when the film starts, we just jump in, it's 1980, and we're back in the Overlook Hotel, and like a lot, and then subsequently after the Overlook Hotel, and like a significant chunk of the beginning of the film, like the first 10 minutes, maybe not 10 minutes, but a while, takes place in the past, quote unquote, because the rest of much of the film is set in current day. And I wanted to know if the book also started there, or if we were like with the characters right after / during the Overlook, or if this was the film kind of trading on nostalgia You know what I mean?
hmm Yeah, the book does begin shortly after Wendy and Danny have left the Overlook and they're living in Florida. Like, we pick up not right where The Shining ends, but like not long afterwards.
Okay. Um, Interesting. And is there any? So do we see any of the Overlook? Like, is there any scenes like or flashbacks or whatever taking place? Like, because doesn't the film starts literally after the prologue or after the introduction of the true knot?
Right.
It starts with Danny like cycling
Mhm.
or big wheeling through the halls of the Overlook. Do we get any of that in the book?
Occasionally, there are moments where he'll like remember or like flashback to, but it's not like I wouldn't call it extensive.
Okay. And yeah, and I'm trying to remember now because I don't remember exactly how it jumps from being in the Overlook to.
I think doesn't he wake up from a dream and then he's in the bed in their apartment in Florida?
I think you're right. I think you're right. I think he is having a dream,
Mhm.
and that's when. Okay, that would make sense. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. So then we jump forward now after we get the whole introduction and a little bit of his childhood post um the Overlook. And then I think we jump forward, or maybe this is around the same time, because this movie takes place over a lot of multiple time frames. Like we time jump several times. Like we
Mhm.
start in 1980, then we jump forward, and then we jump forward again.
Mhm.
And I'm not exactly sure when this moment takes place, but we're introduced to Snakebite Danny, Andy, Snakebite Andy.
Snakebite Andy.
There's too many D-A-N-I, Andy, Danny, whatever. And she's in a movie theater, and a dude comes and sits down next to her, and she mind controls this guy, and then steals his stuff, and then what does what does she tell him to do?
She says that he won't remember what happened, but then
That's right.
she like
She like carves
she
snake bites on
carves
his
snake
face.
bites into his
Yes.
cheek.
But anyways, it turns out that she can like mind control people. She has like and the true knot people like are watching her and they are going to bring her into their cult. And I don't know if she has and maybe this is more of a lost in adaptation. I don't know if what her powers are quote unquote the shining or if it's a different thing that she's able to do or I don't know. Anyways, but she's able to like mind control this guy. And then we find out that she's basically like preying on again, the implication I got from the movie is that she's like preying on pedophiles, it seems like. Because she tells him that she's not or that, something about he's like, "Oh, you're something about their age." What is he?
Yeah, she tells him that like when he sees them the scars in the mirror, he's gonna remember that he likes little girls or something like that.
And so I got the implication I got out of this scene was that she basically is just like doing this to like she's like doing to catch a predator, except then like robbing them or whatever and like scarring their faces. And I wanted to know if that character, which obviously we actually don't know if it's from the book because I don't know if we talked about it yet, but if she has those powers, if she's trapping pedophiles, if any of this is from the book.
Okay. So lots of questions that I picked up on here, but I think I can provide some answers.
Yeah, I don't know.
So Snakebite Andy is in the book. I would say they gave her a slightly bigger role in the movie, but she is like one of the more major members of the True Knot that we like get to know in the book. Now we had some questions about her age in the movie earlier.
Yeah.
She's definitely confirmed older in the book. She's like in her early 30s.
Okay.
Which I don't think she's supposed to be quite that old in the movie.
I truly don't know because again, the vibe I got was that she was lying about her age, but
and it's more implied in the book that she's like posing as a hooker and then robs and mutilates these men who come to see her.
Okay.
And she hates men because her father raped her when she was a child.
Okay. So the movie kind of cuts some of that backstory.
Yeah, so the movie cuts that backstory. If the movie did in fact make her younger, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Like I like that as a choice because I think it fits a little better with her specific backstory.
Yeah.
As
The movie
far,
might mention something about her father abusing her. I may have a
there
vague
might have
memory.
been an
There might be like
offhand,
one line.
but she definitely, there's far more backstory
Yeah.
for her in the book. So I don't know that I can explain like what The Shining is. I think that might be better left to like a king scholar.
Right.
It's a little like, as far as I can tell, having read The Shining and now having read this, I think it's a little kind of like nebulous, like it's vaguely psychic powers
Yeah.
in lots of different applications.
Okay, and that's what I'm just making sure, because that's what I thought. The vibe I got in the movie is that The Shining manifests, and not everybody calls it that
Yeah.
necessarily.
Yeah, like
but
the True Knot, they call it steam.
they call it steam, which kind of is synonymous-ish with like a soul kind of feeling type thing. But like, and because like Abra calls it magic or whatever, and Danny's like, I call it The Shining. And the vibe I got is that it can manifest. It's basically just like magic powers that manifest slightly differently in different people.
Yeah,
so
like an Abra can do like a bunch of things.
Yeah.
They, in the book, all the members of the True Knot have like different talents, and they call Andy's talent, they call her a sleeper.
Yeah.
So she can like make people sleep.
She can put people to sleep, but in the book, in the film, it's more like she can kind of just mind control.
Yeah,
people
it's a little more
general.
like mind control in general.
Yeah.
In the book, in the movie, than it is in the book. In the book, it's more like she can put people to sleep and kind of like make suggestions to them.
Yeah.
Once they're under, and we know that like other members of the True Knot can do like kind of similar things,
and slightly like Rose in the film like astral projects in a way that we've never seen like Danny do or anything like that. And then
and she also like in the book she talks about like, oh, I'm gonna go into Abra's mind and I'm gonna like leave suggestions. And like we see them
incept her.
We see them do that with like the baseball boy too. They like suggest to him like, oh, we're the good guys, and he just like falls right into it.
Well, in the book or in the film, it's just Andy just like is like,
right. They use her for that in the film because we've already seen her do that.
Yeah.
And then there are like other members of the True Knot that they call finders who can like locate kids who have steam. And like on and on and on.
Which I think Crow Daddy, it seems like, because he can like smell them or something. Yeah. So okay, so that's kind of the vibe I got. So it just seems like different people kind of have different, slightly different but similar-ish manifestations of this power, and that Danny's is, the only one Danny and I guess Scatman Carruthers, Dick
Halloran.
Dick Halloran.
Yeah.
Are the only two we're aware of in the first one. Although I think it's implied that maybe Jack also has The Shining,
maybe a little
bit, and that's why he drinks so much, at least partially. Anyways, and because I think that's what they talk about a little bit in this movie. There's a lot going on. This movie's we're gonna miss things if you're a big fan of this.
There's a lot going on in the movie and even more going on in the book. We are going to miss things.
We're gonna miss things. We're gonna get things wrong. So try to extend us a little bit of grace, because we've only seen the film once and you read the book once, and it's just a lot. There's like a lot. It's a lot of, and it's very funny, especially compared to, because there's a lot going on in The Shining, but compared to The Shining, this is like.
Right. Well, The Shining is a fairly like contained story.
Very limited. There's a handful of characters. We don't know very much at all about the world. There's not like lore necessarily.
And this is sprawling.
Yeah. And I could get that from watching the film. Like all of a sudden it's like The Shining. It's very interesting, and it's one of the things I really enjoyed about the movie, which I did like the movie quite a bit, other than a few things here and there. I really liked taking the idea of The Shining and then like because again it's so different. It's like The Shining is this little story about this family and this kid who's like can talk to ghosts or whatever, basically, for lack of a better term, and then we get a little bit of lore with Dick Halloran's character, like the tiniest bit. And in this movie it's like, oh, this all takes place in this world where there's nomadic vampires and they're hunting children, and people have different versions of the. I can't even think of a good. I'm trying to think. Since we watched this, I've been trying to think of a comparison of like a story that did a similar thing, or like a book or movies that did something like this, where you get like a little sliver of a story that seems
Mhm.
like a very contained thing, and then you get a sequel or something, or a different series, and it turns into this bigger, like sprawling thing that you just weren't remotely expecting upon consuming the first piece of the media. And that, I don't know, it's very interesting. And again, it's one of the reasons I really liked the movie, because I thought it was a very fun direction to take.
Mhm.
To take the story of The Shining. It's like just completely unexpected and weird, but I did enjoy it quite a bit because of that. Again, like, if you asked me, what do you think the sequel to The Shining would be? Never in a million years would I be like anything getting close to this.
Yeah,
Like,
no.
you know what I mean? Like, I just, but that being said, it totally works. I was like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
this works. Like, it
Yeah, no,
totally
because
works.
the Shining it's basically a haunted house story that then like pulls back, and it turns out that everything is haunted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like I guess it, like, trying to reverse engineer it. It's almost like if there was a book, if you read a book that was like a love story between like if you read a book that was like a romance novel
Hmm.
between this woman, and now, for good, better, bad fans, I'm basically just describing The Unexpected Race, but it was like a romance novel between like a human who stumbles across this like mysterious person in the woods, and they have like a whirlwind romance, and then like it turns out that they're like an elf or something, and oh my goodness, and they're hunted down by the townspeople. It's like Beauty and the Beast or something, but like it's it's like, oh, they have this romance, but then the town villagers figure out that the this person is like is a freak. They're like, oh, they're a freak, get him out of here, and then it ends kind of tragically or whatever. And then the sequel to that is The Lord of the Rings. You know what I like?
Well, here's the analogy
That's
I
the-
just thought of while you were doing that. Matilda. Okay. Fairly self-contained. We have this one character who has like psychic powers.
Yeah.
It would be like if you had Matilda exactly as it is, and then there was a sequel that was X-Men.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which there's lots of memes about, like her being like,
Yeah.
secretly being like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then like the sequel, it's like Matilda like grows up, and then like Professor X rolls up to her door, and you're like, wait a second, what is going? And he's like, there's been a war between humans and mutants for centuries, and blah blah blah, and yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like if you took this very contained thing, and then it blows up into this like huge, expansive, sprawling epic. It's such an interesting choice, and I can't think of like anything. If anything, I feel like occasionally you will see stories go the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Where
They'll do something big and sprawling, and then
Yeah.
like pull in and focus on just one part
exactly
of it.
like you finding a smaller story set within the world of like Lord of the Rings or something, where we like, oh, let's go in and focus on this little like a story just about like one hobbit, like The Hobbit or something like that, which I guess is kind of a similar, but even that
Yeah.
we were introduced to a lot of the lore and sprawling different characters and stuff in The Hobbit. But anyways, it's a very interesting approach to a sequel, and I think it's kind of cool. It's fun. Okay, anyways, moving on. So one of the big points in the film is that Danny is an alcoholic, and after he ends up in New Hampshire, eventually he ends up going to AA because Billy is in AA. And I wanted to know if AA played a prominent role in the book, because I only asked because Mike Flanagan seems to have I've only seen a handful of things that Mike Flanagan's done. He's done a lot of stuff. But one of the things I've watched is Midnight Mass, and Alcoholics Anonymous plays a pretty big role in that as well. One of our main characters in this very small town, there's like an Alcoholics Anonymous, and he's an alcoholic, and he goes to this and blah, blah, blah. And I wanted to know, and I did find out later that Mike Flanagan is like in recovery, like he's like sober or whatever. I don't know if he did it through AA. I assume probably, based again on the handful of things of his that I've seen. But I wanted to know if that was in the book or if that was a Mike Flanagan edition.
Honestly, compared to the book, I would say that it's not even in the movie. Like
Okay.
it's such a much bigger part of the book
Yeah.
that like the movie reduced it so much
Which, I mean,
that
obviously,
comparatively it's almost not even there.
yeah. Which obviously Stephen King has dealt with his own
Yes,
substance
for
abuse
sure.
issues, so it's totally makes sense. But
Yeah, like, throughout the book, Danny frequently references things that he learned in AA. We go with him to several meetings. The book is constantly referencing like how long he's been sober, how much he wants to drink right now in this moment, how hard it is for him to not drink,
yeah,
et cetera, et cetera.
yeah, we get little
It's
flashes
a
of that.
huge element
Yeah.
in the book.
We get little flashes of that throughout the movie. Obviously, it's more limited because we're not in his head, but two, it's a lot shorter, so we're condensing a lot of stuff down. But there are handfuls of moments. We see him go through the process. The time jump happens after he first gets into AA.
Yeah.
And then we jump forward 8 years, and he's like been sober for 8 years. But there's a handful, especially towards the end, once shit starts to hit the fan. There's moments where he like considers drinking and doesn't, and then once he gets to the Overlook, there's this great scene with Lloyd, the bartender, like pouring him a drink and stuff, and like kind of tempting him to drink, and it's his dad, it's Jack, but Jack keeps saying, "No, I'm Lloyd, the bartender." Blah blah blah. Anyways, so it's definitely there in the film, but it doesn't surprise me, honestly, again, knowing Stephen King's history a little bit, that would be a prominent part of the thing. But it was just very interesting to me, and totally makes sense that Mike Flanagan would be interested in adapting this because, yeah, it's a big part of the sobriety and the battle with those past demons and all that sort of stuff is a big part of all of Flanagan's works that I've seen. So totally tracks. So, speaking of AA, the AA is run in this town that he's in by Dr. John Dalton, who also, it seems, runs like a local hospice or is in charge of like a local hospice facility, and basically offers Danny a job. And when he goes for this, when he's talking to Danny about giving him this job after one of the AA meetings or whatever, they're sitting in this office. And we talked about this in the prequel episode, but it is literally identical to the office that Jack goes and interviews for the Overlook Hotel job in. And I wanted to know if that element, that little weird element, came from the book, of it being like identical.
Okay, so when Danny gets to the town that he ultimately ends up, Fraser.
I don't know the name of it in the
I think
film,
it
but
was
it's in New
Fraser.
Hampshire, I know for sure.
When he gets to that town, he does end up going to talk to. It's a different character. It's not Dr. John Dalton in the book. Even though Dr. John is a character in the book, it's a different character in this particular instance.
Right. Which I think kind of makes sense because it's a little weird that
yeah, I have notes about
he's
that
like
later.
he like runs AA, but he's also the hospice director or something. Maybe he's not. Maybe I misinterpreted in the movie, and he's just like knows the people who run the hospice and is like whatever. Doesn't matter.
But he goes to talk to this other character whose name is Casey. And Casey is like kind of a local government, I think. I'm trying to remember exactly. He's like a big wig in the town. And he does run the local AA chapter, and he ends up helping Dan find a room to rent, and he gets him a job, not initially at the hospice, but working in the teeny town part-time. And then Dan gets the
which he does in the
job
film as well, but
later.
It seems like he's volunteering in part of the little town thing.
But when he is in that office talking to him, he does think about his father, like sitting in an office across the desk interviewing for the Overlook job. So it kind of similar.
So definitely something that Flanagan thought of that and went, all right.
Yeah, we'll just make it
we'll
look
just make
like
it we'll literally make it the office, because one, we're already have allusions to it in the book, but two, it'll make it's a fun, like, creepy, weird Easter egg that fits within this.
Right. Well, and then we can get that same kind of like callback, but we don't have to be in Danny's head to get it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because a lot of this movie, I think a lot of what we're seeing is kind of through the perspective of Danny at times.
Right.
Depending on the moment and stuff. So that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. He gets the job in hospice, and we're introduced to Azzy, the cat, who is the cat in this, which was like the inspiration for this book,
Mm-hmm.
or one of the inspirations for this book. Is based on a real life cat that supposedly, at a hospice would like go sit on the bed of patients that were about to die. And that's what happens in this book. And Azzy is this little cat that goes around to different rooms. And I wanted to know if Azzy in the film just looked like you imagined from the description in the book. I'm just wondering.
Not really, no.
Okay.
Azzy is just described as a gray cat in the book, and I think
He's like white.
the cat
in
was
the
like
film.
white and with some darker spots
Yeah.
in the film. So, but a cat is a cat, and I love all cats.
Who doesn't?
And by the way, if you are thinking about watching this movie or reading this book, if you have not already,
Oh, yeah.
the cat is safe.
No, yeah. Cat's fine.
Cat is safe in both. Nothing bad happens to the cat.
Not only safe, it seemingly lives forever. It might be an immortal cat because we get a time jump, which I'm about to ask about, in the film of 8 years, and the cat has not appeared to age a day in that 8 years. And a cat looked fully grown at the beginning. So this cat literally may be immortal. So
I mean, if it knows when people are going to die, who's to say?
who's to say?
Who's to say?
But speaking of that time jump in the film, Danny starts going to AA, gets his job in hospice, and then all of a sudden, boop, 8 years later, Danny's been sober for 8 years. We jump forward. And I wanted to know if that book, if the book had that time jump, and two, it seems to me in the movie that it's slightly implied that the actual his job working in hospice and being able to use his, at least to some extent, slightly use his shining in a positive way
Mhm.
by like talking and kind of like helping these patients as they're passing away, basically allowed him to become sober and not, to overcome his addiction. And I wanted to know if one, we get the time jump, and two, if you felt like the job in hospice was what was one of the primary motivating, or not even motivating, but primary factors in him being able to overcome his addiction.
So there are a lot of time jumps in the book.
Okay.
It takes place over a couple decades. We like start out when Danny's still a kid, and then time jumps into the like further into the 80s, I think, and then time jumps again. And then time jumps again to when Abra is born, which is like right before 9/11. More on that later. And then time jumps again to when she's a teenager. So we get quite a few time jumps.
Okay.
I never got the implication from the book that working in hospice was a huge part of what helped Danny get sober. I felt like the message in the book was more like he gets sober from having a support system and having like people to lean on, like friends, family, basically.
Yeah.
Which and I guess the having the steady job in the hospice and being like needed in that capacity could be part of that, but I
Yeah.
didn't feel like that was part of the overall message in the book.
Interesting, because to me in the film, like obviously he also, he's friends with Billy, and Billy's the one who gets him into AA, and being in AA obviously helps. But there's a scene right before the time jump where he first has that conversation with that first patient who's dying with the cat and everything, and he uses his shining to talk to them, and it felt to me in that scene like this lifted this weight off him, because we find out, and I think this is also part of the reason that you get a slight implication that maybe Jack had something of the shining. We find out that he was basically using alcohol to not
Right.
feel the shining, to not experience,
Yeah.
to dull the power, whatever you want to call it, to
Yeah.
dull his ability, so that he didn't have to experience the shining or whatever. But essentially, yeah, just like doling out that sensation. And to me, it felt like being in hospice and finding an outlet for the shining that was helpful and wasn't like weird
Wasn't,
or
like,
harmful or
traumatizing.
traumatizing, but
Yeah.
in fact was the opposite, allowed him to not need to medicate that away anymore, basically.
No,
Let's
I,
get
I
into
think that's fair. I think that's something you could read from the book for sure. I think maybe the reason I did not get that rage from the book is because we don't see like that first initial time that he uses his shining in that capacity
Okay.
in the book. When we time jump and he's already been working at hospice for a while and has already like
Been sober.
garnered this
Is
reputation.
he sober at that point?
Yeah, he's
already?
sober at
Okay.
that point, and he's all like we jump in to where he's already garnered the reputation as Dr. Sleep for helping people
Yeah.
like cross over.
Yeah.
So we don't see him like come upon that like realization that that's something he can do
Yeah.
in the book.
Yeah. Interesting. I thought it was, I really liked that angle in the movie because I thought it was an interesting angle, especially because, you know, I can imagine that the job of being a hospice, you know, he's an orderly, I think. He's not like a nurse technically, but
Yeah.
or whatever. He's like an orderly, but still, I think even regardless of the position, working in hospice would be something that for most people would be something that would drive you to drink. Like being around a bunch of people dying all the time and stuff would be the kind of thing that might push people to drink. And I think it is a very interesting choice and makes a lot of sense for somebody who has this other issue happening.
Yeah.
That environment kind of works opposite for him. And because it allows a healthy and non-traumatic avenue for him to use his ability, means that he no longer has to medicate it away, I thought made a lot of sense and was really interesting. And it does sound a little bit like from the prequel, from my memory, that was kind of what Stephen King was going for. Just maybe the movie makes it a little more like surface level, or a little more
potentially.
like it throws it into a little more sharp relief that that's what's going on there. So, okay. So I wanted to know if Danny has a pen pal that a psychic pen pal that he writes on a giant chalk wall to communicate with, because I thought that was interesting. He moves into this apartment, and like within the first week, or I don't know how quickly, but very quickly he's there. He gets a message from a person, and just I have a note about it later, but this movie, to its benefit, gives you no answers. Like it just like is like doing stuff and is like, hope you're keeping up or along with the ride. Like it's just all of a sudden there's a random person writing messages on the wall. We're never gonna explain who that is. Like we do explain who it is. We realize it's Aber or whatever, but like Danny never questions it. We never like. He's just like rolls with it and is like, all right, and it's like writing back to this psychic and it all works. Again, it's funny because it all works. Like the movie just like, here you go, and just like goes, and you just have to like buy in and like roll with it. But it does work. I never felt like lost. Like I never felt like what is going on? Like a little bit, but in a way that felt intentional and didn't feel like wasn't frustrating. Anyways, but I wanted to know if he has a psychic pen pal in the book.
Yes, it's not a giant chalk wall in the book.
Much more cinematic, more fun.
Yes, but Abra does initially communicate with Danny by writing on a chalkboard that's in his room.
Yeah, that's a good movie choice. That's a good movie change. Making it a giant wall, because the previous tenant was like a math.
Yeah, he was like a student or something,
and would like do their math homework on the wall or whatever, or something like that, or scribble their formulas on the wall. I thought that was a good. That was fun. So then we get to the big sort of inciting incident, which is the True Knot, the cult capturing what is his name? Billy?
Bradley is the little boy's name.
Yeah.
But they call him the baseball boy.
Yeah, the baseball
for the
player.
most part.
They sense his ability. They watch him at a baseball game, and then as he's walking home on the side of a highway, which I was like, he's just like wandering down the side of a highway. I mean, I guess it's the middle of nowhere in Idaho or something like that. So Iowa. So sure, but it was just like he's just like in the middle of nowhere walking down the highway, and it's not like 1980. That's like current day.
Yeah.
And I was like, I feel like parents don't really let kids do that anymore, but okay. And then he gets abducted by the cult. And then they fucking kill him in just one of the more horrifying scenes I've watched in a movie in a while, which is not even particularly graphic visually. It's just awful though. And I wanted to know if the scene in the book felt similarly awful of them torturing and killing this child.
Yeah. It's almost identical to what happens in the book. I would say though that it's more horrifying in the movie because we actually see like fairly little of it in the book because we're seeing it through Abra's
Vision,
perspective,
yeah.
and we get like snatches of description.
Yeah.
And then like later on when she revisits to try to like find out where his body is, we get a little bit more. But the film I think was much more visceral.
Oh yeah, no,
and
it was
detailed.
horrifying. I was like, holy shit. Which that's not out of line for Flanagan. That's what he does really well. Is his movies do not rely on like cheap jump scares and and that sort of thing. He's much more of a psychological horror kind of guy, and even this is not necessarily. A lot of times it's more just like weird, creepy stuff and whatnot. But this is just like horrifying depravity in a way that's just like, oh god. Anyways, that scene sucks. But after that happens, Abra reaches out because she, like you mentioned, she sort of witnesses this psychically, and then she reaches out to Danny, and she writes on the chalk wall "murder." But Danny like rolls, it's like knocked out of bed by
the force
psychic
of her
force of
psychic communication.
Yeah, and he's like knocked out of bed, and he gets up and he looks in the mirror like next to his bed, and he sees on the wall behind him it says "Red Rum." And it's a fun little callback, obviously, because the red rum from The Shining. And I wanted to know, and then he turns around and says "murder." And I wanted to know if that little detail of the red rum in the reflection came from the book.
No, it doesn't, but I really liked this change. In the book, Abra writes, "They are killing the baseball boy" on the chalkboard, which is accurate.
Yes. And we get there eventually in the book where he's like, or in the film where he's like asking her, and he's like, who?
And she says, the baseball boy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked the nod to the original movie. I liked like the drama and the impact of that scene.
Yeah.
It was much more impactful than what happened in the book, I think.
No, it's very fun. It's very exciting. I enjoy it. Then we get a great line. I believe he's at work and he walks into a room that's empty because Azzy goes in there, and then Dick Halloran's in there. Yeah. The ghost of Dick Halloran. And they have a conversation. They're talking about stuff. And he's basically, Dick Halloran gives him like a little brief primer on the true knot. And he has this great line that I just wanted to know if it came from the book, talking about the true knot. He says, "They eat screams and drink pain, and they've noticed that little girl." It's a great line. Is it in the book?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
They eat screams and drink pain is for sure.
Okay. I mean, that's the important part. That's the part that I was mainly interested in. Yeah. Because they eat screams and drink pain is a
great line.
It's very fun stuff. Very fun stuff. So then Abra and maybe my favorite scene in the movie, not Abra, sorry, Rose astral projects into Abra's like dreams, basically. Like she's asleep. And finds her home and goes in to like get information and figure out where she is and stuff like that, because they're aware of her now at this point. I think this is post. She noticed her during when they were killing.
Yeah, the movie speeds up the timeline a little bit here, because what happens in the book is that she has this experience where she like accidentally psychically witnesses them killing this boy, and then 2 years go by.
Oh, okay.
And then she's like flipping through like one of those magazines that you get for free in the mail, and it has on the back like a missing and exploited children, and she sees his picture and she's like, "Oh god,
yeah,
that's right, that's something that happened," and it like brings all those memories flooding back. So then she tries to use the picture to like see if she can find out where his body's buried, and that's when they like she like pings on their radar again.
Yeah, movie truncates that in a similar way, but like but there's no time jump here. But basically, while the killing is happening, Rose notices that She's like,
Yes.
somebody was watching.
Right, which is also accurate
Okay.
to the book.
And then in the film, I can't remember. I think something happens and she's able, because it's in the supermarket and they like, she like jumps into Rose's mind somehow in the supermarket.
Yeah, they accidentally switch brains basically.
Yeah. And then Rose goes to like find her because she realizes how powerful she is. She's like got a sense of how like, oh my god, she's got so much steam, blah blah blah. We got to find her. So she's trying to find her, and she does this astral projection, blah blah blah. Gets into her room. While she's in there, it turns out this was all a trap that Abra had set up, and she traps Rose's hand. She's like opening like a dream filing drawer or whatever and going through it, and then traps her hand in there, and then it turns around and Abra is like there, and she's in the film. She's got no face. Her face is like smooth, kind of, and she's got like this long blue hair. And I wanted to know if the weird, horrifying, eyeless Abra demon representation of herself was from the book, because I thought that was creepy and cool.
So it's not the same as what's in the movie, but a similar thing does happen in the book, which in the movie we see like a little figurine of a character that looks kind of like that on Abra's bedside
which I had a
table.
note about that, and I forgot about this, but that blue-haired
looks
character
like an anime
it's like
character
an anime
or something.
character,
I don't know if it's an actual character or not. I don't know enough
probably
about anime.
not. My guess would be probably not. They probably just made something up for the film, not to worry about like copyright. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's not the same thing, but during this scene in the book, Abra does create this like avatar of herself that's like an adult, and it's like this huge warrior woman like riding a horse, and she has like a spear and a shield, which is
Sick.
also pretty sick.
Yeah.
And also, fun fact, then later on after that, we find out that Abra based that avatar on Daenerys Stormborn. Which is supposed to be also pre-Game of Thrones, the show. It's from the books.
Yeah.
Because at this point, it's supposed to be like 2010 or 2011.
Yeah.
So like maybe the very beginning of the show, but she specifically is like the books.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's a good choice by the movie to go away from that one, which also makes sense because then they get a character that's just not like, again, assuming that this anime character is not. Oh, actually, it might be because the posters on the wall are a real thing. The posters on the wall are RWBY. That's a real show. She has a bunch of posters on her wall that are an actual anime, so that character might actually be RWBY. Is an actual show, like an actual anime or manga or whatever.
The posters on the wall.
But I just as a cursory glance, none of the characters in that have blue hair. They're
well, if you know if that's a real character or not, let us know.
Because this is, none of these particularly fit. I guess it could be that one character with the cat ears. But it doesn't really look like that.
No.
But because that 100%, I saw that poster. There's an RWBY poster on the wall, which I know nothing about this. I just knew that was an anime. It might be pronounced Ruby. I'm not sure. But anyways, so she it was all a trap for Rose. She traps her hand in the thing, and Rose is trying to escape. And as she's trying to escape, she's like yanking her hand out of the thing and like degloves her hand. It's horrifying. And I wanted to know also if that little detail was from the book, because holy shit.
Yes, it is. That does happen. Her hand gets extremely damaged. Like when she comes back, I did like there was one detail that the movie added where it like knocks her off the roof of the RV. Fantastic. Loved that chef's kiss.
That whole scene is my favorite thing in the movie.
Yeah, that was an amazing scene.
The astral projection, and I had this later, but we might as well talk about it here because we're talking about it. The astral projection, the whole part of the astral projection is really cool, but then when she gets on the front lawn and she's like looking up at the house, and then she like flies up to the house, and the camera is like locked with her, and she flips upside down and then flies in through the window, is one of the coolest shots I've seen in a movie in a while.
The whole scene is fucking sick.
I was like, it like knocked my socks off. I was like, this is one of the coolest shots I've seen in a while. This is awesome. Super cool. And then, yeah, that shot where after she gets kicked out of the, like, Abra kicks her out, she's like flying through space again. And then she slams into her body on the roof of the RV and rolls off and slams into the ground. All of that. I was like, this, yeah, that shit's sick. It was like the best scene in the movie. It was so cool. It was so cool. So as we get back, she arrives back, and then I don't remember exactly when it transpires, but Grandpa Flick has been having issues this whole time. He's another one of the members of the True Knot. He's like significantly older.
Yeah,
than
he's
the
like
rest
the
of
oldest
them.
member.
Yeah, and he is he's been having issues, but he is now dying, or they call it cycling or something.
Yeah, they call it cycling.
Yeah, but he's cycling, and in the film, as he dies, he cycles, and he like legitimately dies. As soon as he does, all the rest of them of the knot like rush in and like suck all his steam up like hyenas, like vultures. And I wanted to know if that detail was in the book because I liked that.
It is not, but I thought this was a fantastic addition. Really liked it. I thought it made them even more inhuman. This idea that they would just leap to feed on one of their own that just died.
Yeah, like literally, it's not like a moment of waiting. As soon as he dies, they're all like, "Rah!"
Gotta get that steam.
Yeah.
Can't let it escape into the ether.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Danny has decided he was going to get involved and help Abra. And because she wants him to go find where where the baseball boy was buried. She needs his baseball glove because she thinks if she gets his baseball glove, she will be able to find them.
Yeah, because one of the members of the True Knot like put it on for a minute.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
she thinks that if she gets that, then she'll have like a link to that guy.
And then she'll be able to find them so they can stop them or whatever. And Danny's like, okay. And he recruits Billy. And he basically explains to Billy in a seemingly a matter of minutes, hey, we're going to go dig up a child's body.
Yeah.
And Billy's like, okay. And hops in the car and rides across, drives like 12 hours across the United States from New Hampshire to Iowa to dig up the body of an 8-year-old with they don't talk to the cop. There's nothing, and I just wanted to know if that's how it plays out in the book and if Billy is as ride or die with Danny as he is in the film.
So that does happen in the book. That plays out pretty much the same. Although it's Dr. John who goes with Dan in the book. It's not Billy. And Dr. John is Abra's like family doctor or like pediatrician, and he knows about Abra's powers.
Okay.
He also witnessed the spoon incident
where they were all stuck
in the
to
book.
ceiling.
Yeah, they were all where she hung all the spoons off the ceiling.
Yeah.
So he kind of has been like primed.
Okay, so he's at least a little bit.
Yeah.
Because Billy would know anything, and is just like immediately like,
but,
okay.
I mean, he also does like Billy also knows. He also brings Billy into it.
In the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And which Billy, the way that he's able to do that is that Billy also has like a little bit of The Shining, like sometimes like knows things that he shouldn't know, etc.
Okay. Interesting. Anyway, so they get the baseball glove and they're able to figure out where they all are, and then they plan this elaborate ruse where Rose basically like creates a doppelganger of herself out of
Abra does.
Sorry, yes. I keep calling Abra Rose. Abra creates a doppelganger of herself out of a doll, basically, to trick the True Knot into thinking that she's at this like campsite with Danny. Well, actually, I don't even know if they know that they're there. Probably not. They just think Rose is there. I guess it doesn't matter. They lay a trap for the True Knot. And I was not expecting this, where like they basically just, Billy is like, all right, because we find out Billy used to hunt, and so he's got hunting rifles, and him and Danny just go up into the woods, and the cult shows up to kidnap Abra, thinking she's there. Turns out she's not actually there. She's still back in her house and just kind of like projecting.
Yeah, she's like
herself.
astral projecting, basically.
Basically. And then as soon as they realize, oh crap, Abra isn't actually here, Danny and Billy just start shooting everybody.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what? And then all of the cult pulls out guns and we get a giant firefight. And I was like, is this in the book? Because this doesn't feel like this should be in the book. So.
Actually, that scene is pretty similar.
Okay.
So it's Dan and Billy or Dr. John, I can't remember, and also no, it's Dan and Dr. John and Abra's father at that point. And they hatch a very similar plot where Abra like throws her consciousness into her stuffed rabbit, and then they take the stuffed rabbit.
Yeah.
So she's basically like leading them on a false trail,
Right, yeah.
making them think that she's going on a picnic with her dad.
Oh, okay.
And then when they show up at this like picnic ground, the adults just like mow them down.
All right.
Because in the book, none of the members of the True Knot have guns because they were not expecting to need guns.
That
and
I
they,
will
like
say,
they don't usually need guns.
Right. I will say that I thought that didn't make a ton of sense in the film that they all have guns. I mean, maybe sure, but we've never seen them use guns up until this point for anything. And then it's like all of them pull guns out of their waists, and I'm like, wait, what? Okay. And we just get there was a firefight. It's very interesting, but in general, like the idea, like the trap when shooting them all is from the book. They just not as much of a firefight potentially. Interesting. So after this all ends up, Andy, Snakebite Andy is the only one that survives in this ambush, and she gets into the RV that's there. And Danny tries to like confront her, but she's able to like mind control him to get him to stop. Because his gun is out of bullets or whatever, and he's going to reload, and then she's able to mind control him. And then as she's about to have him kill himself or something, Billy comes around the side of the building and shoots her. And so she's dying, but as she's dying, Billy walks up to her and Danny's like, no. And then Andy turns to him and tells Billy to shoot himself, and he immediately just shoots himself in the head and kills himself. And it's like, holy shit. And I wanted to know if that was in the book.
It is not, but it does call to something that happens in the book. So when Crow Daddy abducts Abra, the car crash does happen in the book where they like make him crash the car, but the car crash does not kill him.
Ew.
And then Dan/Abra are able to like force him to turn his pistol around on himself.
Okay.
And shoot himself.
So they do that.
Yes.
But it's definitely inspired from something from. Yeah, I think it makes sense with where this story goes to kind of tie up. That's an unfortunate way to talk about that, but like with where Danny's story goes and stuff, like, and where this story ultimately ends up, like killing off extraneous characters and kind of bringing us down to just
makes
Danny
a
and
lot of
Abra
sense
makes a lot of sense
with where the story goes. Yeah,
it's also in line with other things that I've seen of Flanagan. He's a fan of subverting your expectations and kind of killing off characters in unexpected and like violent and upsetting ways. That's like kind of a thing he does. And so I think it works, and it's a horrifying scene. Because at this point, we've come to really like Billy at this point, as a friend to Danny, and so it's definitely upset. But so Billy just lives in the book.
Yeah,
that's good.
I have more on that later from another question that you asked.
So you kind of just talked about this, but I thought this was interesting. Is that after Crow Daddy is able to kidnap Abra from her house because he realizes, and the movie does not explain this, he just like shows up at her house and is like, I gotcha.
I can explain this.
And I was like, okay, sure. But I guess it kind of makes sense because he's like the tracker, but then why would he not have just told whatever? He's able to get there and get her, and everybody else goes this other place. So he kidnaps Abra, but she's like drugged, so she can't use her powers because she's like in and out of consciousness from him drugging her. And then Danny is able to like inhabit her body, and like use his powers through her to get Crow Daddy to crash the car and die because he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. Great safety PSA in this movie. It's a good one-liner too, but it's a good like fun line from our protagonist. But I wanted to know if that's, again, you already said, but that's how they initially overcome.
Yeah,
Crow
that's
Daddy
how
and
they
then-
initially like overcome him.
Yeah, cool. So now in the
Oh,
film,
right. Real quick though, I can explain how he knew to go to her house. if
yeah,
you
how
want.
did he know to go
Okay,
to her house when
so-
everybody else didn't?
He's not the main tracker in the book. He can like kind of track,
Okay.
but their main tracker is another character who Abra calls Barry the Chunk because she's pretty sure that's his name. His name is actually a racial slur that I'm not going to say.
Okay.
Um
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I just put it together.
Yeah.
Just swap a couple, a letter
Swap
around.
one vowel.
Yeah, and you'll get there.
You'll get there. So he's the main tracker. He's the one tracking her, and he's like dying of the measles.
Right. Because that's a whole thing.
Yes, more on that later.
Yeah, let's get to that.
And the book is very clear that Abra probably would not have been able to fool him if he hadn't been dying of the measles. And so, but at one point, the True Knot has come up with this plan to like shock Abra in case she was trying something sneaky. And their plan was to put on a pornographic movie so that she sees it and is like, ah. And that does happen.
Okay.
I really wish you guys could see Brian's face right now as I try to explain this. So she gets this like brief like shot of this movie and she's like, ah, what was that? And she does like slip for a minute.
Okay.
And then so Barry goes to Crow Daddy and he's like, hey, I'm not I'm 99% sure she's at this campground picnic
Right.
thing, but there was this one moment and maybe it was just like a memory, I don't know.
Right.
But then Crow Daddy's like, well, we better check it out anyway. So
Okay.
he separates from the group and like goes to investigate
Yeah.
whether she's actually at her house.
Interesting. Yeah. I will say that the movie, it wasn't really an issue. It was just like, whatever. He figured it out. Who
The
knows?
movie just streamlines things a little.
Well, in a way that, again, doesn't really make sense. It's like, well, if he knew how did he know she was there? And if he knew, why did he let everybody else go to the...
Right.
It's
It's a little tiny bit of a plot hole, but it's one of
it's
those
fine.
things that doesn't matter
No,
unless you're like CinemaSins.
Yeah, no, it really doesn't. Like I said, it truly doesn't. It didn't affect my viewing experience at all. I was like, whatever, it's fine. But I was just wondering, like,
Yeah.
how do you, okay.
And it would have been so clunky to try to explain
Yeah.
like how he knew to break off from the group. And
Yeah. And there might
yeah.
even be a deleted scene where there's some sort
yeah,
of,
it
like,
could be.
Yeah, and they just like, it doesn't really matter. he's the bad guy, and he figured out where she was. Whatever. Okay, fine. So they're getting everybody is dead at this point, except
for Rose.
except for Rose and Danny and Abra. Basically, everybody else is either dead or not involved at this point. And Danny is going to take her, and we'll get to it in a second where he's taking her. But Rose is like, oh shit, everybody's dead. I got to go get them. I got to get revenge, and I got to get them. And she like powers up for this final confrontation. She like the remaining handful of bottles of steam they have. She just like mainlines them all and is like, and like supercharges. And I want to know if she supercharges on steam in the book so she can go defeat Danny and Abra.
Oh, so she's not the only one left at the end. There are
okay.
other members still alive, and they do all take steam, like the last of the steam that they have left before that final battle. But that specific scene where she's like mainlining it on the floor of her RV is not from the book.
Okay. And then, so we've already kind of discussed this a little bit, but obviously my question was, because I was not expecting this in the film, Danny takes Abra to the Overlook as like the place to do this last stand, and I thought that was great. It's weird, it's fun, it doesn't make really any sense. Not that it doesn't make sense, it makes sense why he would do it, but it's just I was so not expecting it, and it was such a fun weird twist for the third act of this film to all take place at the Overlook. And I wanted to know if the book did that, because in the film they start heading there, and is on their way there that we get the theme all of a sudden from The Shining kicks in, which I thought was great. And I was like, man, if the climax of this film is just Home Alone, but with adult Danny Torrance at the Overlook, like Home Aloneing Rose, and it kind of is, like in a very
bit.
like, I mean, not really, but like he does lay a trap, and the trap is the ghosts, and like, but it's not really quite as zany and fun as as Home Alone is. Because I was imagining like her running from room to room, and like, she runs into the room, like she's trying to find them, and then she ends up in the room with the bathtub lady, and then like,
yeah, that was kind of also what I
and
was
then like stumbles out of that room and wanders into the room where the bear dog guy's blowing the other guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like all this like ridiculous. I was kind of expecting that, and I'm glad, I think, that it wasn't that silly. That being said, I still think the third act of this movie is like a little nostalgia baity in a way that felt a little forced at times. I enjoyed it. I was like, I love overall what's going on here, but there was a handful of moments like with the maze and stuff that I was like, all right, like, okay, like it's fine. Again, didn't dislike it, just was kind of mixed on it. But I want to know if going to the Overlook and all of that is in the book.
Well, the Overlook burns down at the end of The Shining, the book. No. But the final battle in the book does take place at the campground where the Overlook once stood.
Which again makes sense.
Yes.
Yes. So yes, essentially, because this film takes place in the universe of the film.
Yeah.
And the Overlook did not burn down.
Right. We can go back to
at the end of the film. They go back to the same place. It's just the building is still there in the film, which makes sense.
And Abra does not actually go.
Oh, okay.
In the book, she like astral projects again.
Oh, they do the same trick again. Yeah, I think it makes sense to actually take her there.
Well, especially with the way that everything plays out in the movie, and like everybody being
twice.
Dead.
Like,
yeah.
Well, I just think also like, I just think it would be weird to do the trick again that we just did. Like, just do that trick again. It's like, okay, but like, would it work again? I don't know. Yeah, I think it makes sense to just have them both go there. It's more interesting. So anyways, to get to the Overlook, lots of stuff happens. It's a little bit confusing, but at some point they end up facing off in the main like foyer area where Jack is writing his his book in the original movie. And they're like, and with the big staircase. And they're kind of squaring off, and then they like all of a sudden Rose is like in the maze. She's out in the hedge maze, and then she starts getting attacked by Rose.
By
Abra. I don't know why I want to call her Rose so much. I think it's because Abra's a dumb name. It's not a dumb name. It's just she's got magic powers, and her name is Abra. Like, it's just a little like, all right, JK, we're like, what are we like? It's just a little like, what are we doing here? But it's fine. It's just, I think that's why my brain wants her to be named literally anything else.
Burned.
I'm just saying, like,
you torched Stephen King.
I'm just saying, like, what are we like? I get it. Like, it's fine. Again, it's not a problem, and I don't even dislike the name Abra, but it's like, oh, she's got magic powers and her name's Abra. Like, it's like, okay. Anyways, it just doesn't feel like it fits in with the rest of the people in the whatever. Like, everybody else just had normal names except for a weird cult. Whatever, doesn't matter. I'm just explaining away the fact that I have a bad memory. It's not even memory. It's just like my brain is just switching it because I remember. It's just whatever, doesn't matter. There's a scene in the maze where Rose is being attacked by Abra, and Abra like keeps running at her, and this is all in Danny's head.
Yeah, I think it's in Danny's head.
Danny's head, I think. But Rose is there, and she's like, she keeps running by and like slashing her legs, and I wanted to know if that or her knees, like the back of her knees, and like hamstringing her, and I wanted to know if anything about that is from the book or why you think that the movie. It's so specific. She keeps like running by and like with this weird little knife.
Yeah.
That she has, and like slicing the back of her legs, and I was like, why? What is happening?
Okay.
And why?
So none of that is from the book, and I don't think there was anything in the book that connects to like any kind of significance with taking someone out at the knees.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think the knife is supposed to be the knife that Rose used to torture the little boy.
Oh, I thought in the okay, because I'll take your that could be in my mind. I thought the knife she had in that scene was straight in that Rose had, and that the knife that Abra has in that scene at the end is like a weird like curved blade.
I don't know. I didn't get a good look at it.
You never get a good look
yeah.
at either of them, to be fair. Like you only see them very briefly.
I thought it was supposed to be the same knife, or like like I'm torturing you with your own knife kind of
and
thing.
That would make sense, because she does say the line, like Abra says, the pain purifies the steam or something. She says the same thing that Rose said to the boy.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely that. Like I get why she's like, quote unquote, torturing her, like symbolically. It was just like the way it was done felt really like she's like the Flash, and I don't know. It just felt so specific and strange to me that it felt like it had to mean something that I just wasn't getting. Like, I don't know.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
I liked going back to the snowy maze though. I thought that was fun.
I didn't dislike it necessarily. It just felt like some of the...
It maybe went on a little long.
I think that was it. Maybe it went on a little long, and I was just like, okay.
But I also kind of thought it went on a little long in The Shining too, so...
and that's not... You're not wrong. I don't know. There were just elements of the going back to the Overlook that felt a little pandery to me. And I really enjoyed it overall, and I don't know if I have a good reason why. It was just moments where it felt like a little bit like I was being like, remember this? Hey, you remember
yeah.
that? Like, to the point, like, too much, just a little too much. Not way too much, just a little too much. Like, overall, I thought, like, I really liked the idea of going back to the Overlook. I like having the ghosts come back, which we're gonna talk about in a second, and like, you know, I like all of it. I really love the scene where he goes and he has a conversation with Lloyd the bartender, and like, you know, he gets to have this confrontation with his dad as an adult, and they talk about drinking, like they talk about their demons, and like I really loved all of that. I thought all of that was great. There was just a little bit of it here and there. It was like a little bit too much of like, you remember, see what we're doing here? It's like, oh yeah, I mean, I see. You don't have to keep hitting me over the head of what you're doing. Like, I see what you're doing, you know. It's like, all right. It was just a little bit, like 5 to 10% too much for me, but overall, again, I really did like it. Okay, last couple questions. I just asked about it, and you kind of alluded to it earlier, but I wanted to know, because the big climax of this, Rose gets the best of Danny after she realizes she's in Danny's mind in the maze, gets out of it right before he's able to trap her in a box. She gets out, and then they have a fight where he's like got the axe, and she's coming at him, and he hits her with the axe, but it's not enough to stop her. She punctures his femoral artery, so he's bleeding to death. But as he's bleeding out, he unleashes all of the ghosts from the boxes in his mind. They all come out, and then, sensing the power that Rose has, they all descend on her and consume her in a truly fun, like, horrifying villain death. And I wanted to know if that's what happens in the book, because I thought that was fun.
No.
Okay.
That's not what happens in the book. He's only got one ghost left in a box.
What happened to the other ones?
Well, we only know for sure that he trapped 2 of them, which is Mrs. Massey, the bathtub ghost, and Horace Derwent,
which one
the
is
guy
that?
with the confetti on his shoulders.
Oh, okay.
And when he goes to open the boxes in their final battle, Mrs. Massey's box is just full of dust. So she shriveled into nothing, I guess.
Okay.
So he releases Horace Derwent, who does end up killing one of the other cult members.
Okay, but not Rose. Okay.
I did like that the movie brought back all of the ghosts. I wish it would have done it a little differently and not just had them all like standing
crowded around,
like in a big family portrait.
I don't
around
disagree
them.
with
like
that.
That was a little hokey to me.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
But I did like that we get to see like a lot of the different characters again.
Yeah, I think they could have handled it slightly different. Again, I thought a lot about. Yeah, I already said it, but I think a lot about when they get to the Overlook to the end of the film. I like a lot of the overall ideas that are happening. I
Yeah.
just thought the execution at time was a little like
A little hokey.
lacking, a little hokey, a little bit like less nuanced and interesting than the rest of the film had been. It just felt a little like big budget, like dumb kind of horror movie climax. Like I felt like all of a sudden I was watching like 13 Ghosts or something. a little bit in a way that felt a little disappointing considering how good the rest of the movie had been and how, again, how subtle and sort of slow burn and everything it had been. It just felt a little again, overall idea of what they're doing at the end I thought was great, just the execution not as perfect as the rest of the movie was, but it's a minor nitpick. But anyway, so and I guess we'll get to it, but after in the film, after all of the ghosts kill Rose, they then possess Danny and are trying to get him to stop the hotel from burning down, but they also are trying to like get Abra, or like he's coming to kill Abra. He basically turns into his father at this point. He's like running around the halls with the axe, like chasing Abra, which I thought was fun. And I thought it worked. I thought the little single eye thing was a little hokey, like where one eye is like whited out and possessed and the other eye is like not, or whatever. I thought it was a little hokey, but again, overall fine. But he's able to get to Abra and she's able to like kind of cut through and talk to him and he tells her to get out of there. And then he's able to not stop the ghosts from stopping the hotel from burning down, basically. And I wanted to know if the ghosts possess him. And then just to roll this into the second question here, he's able to stop them. The hotel goes up in flames. We get the scene where he has like the vision / we hit this moment of him reuniting with his mother, with Wendy, at the end as the hotel burns down around them in this sweet moment. And he dies. And I wanted to know if any of that comes from the book, if that's at all how the book ends.
So the ghosts don't possess him.
Okay.
Rose briefly possesses him and tries to force him to strangle Abra like on the astral plane.
Okay. It's all very difficult to talk about because it's all very like
and there's a lot more backstory and explanation for things in the book, so I'm kind of struggling to like explain exactly what's going on to you who does not have the same background knowledge. There's not a moment with his mother.
Okay.
When they finally defeat Rose, they do this by pushing her off a cliff.
Okay.
She falls to her death.
Okay.
And then we like pull back and we find out that the ghost of his father is there and like helped push her off the cliff. And then they like Danny and the ghost of his father like have a moment where he like waves at him and then vanishes.
Interesting.
And it's implied that now his ghost is like at peace.
Yeah.
Having righted the wrongs that he committed.
Interesting. I think I prefer the movie there in that the movie does not redeem Jack Torrance. This movie doesn't.
Not at
whereas
all.
it sounds like this book not redeems him necessarily, but like gives him like a happy
gives him his rest.
But I like that the
end.
film does not, because we get the confrontation or sort of that big scene between, and I think it's a brilliant scene, and a great way to do it, to have that over the bar where Jack had the talk with the bartender, but then having the bartender be Jack, but not be Jack, like denying that they're actually Jack. And at the end of that scene, they don't come to a good resolution.
No.
Like it ends poorly. And Danny kind of just comes to terms with the fact that his father isn't kind of redeemable in that moment, or at least, or to something along those lines. And the movie takes it where focuses on the relationship between Danny and his mother, which I think is a smart way to take that story, especially considering everything from The Shining and how that plays out, and if you go back and listen to our Shining episode and what we talked about in there, about how and it's obviously complicated a little bit by this movie where we find out that like there's vampires and all this sort of stuff. But my interpretation of The Shining had always been that the problems that Jack Torrance faced was not the Overlook Hotel.
No.
And I think it's still the case even after this movie. But like the ghosts in the Overlook Hotel and stuff were just exacerbating issues
Yeah,
that were
they fed on his
it
issues
fed on the
that
issues that were already
existed.
existed, and that Jack never came to a place where he dealt with those inner demons in any way. And so I think maintaining that in this film and having it end in a place where we're focused on Danny and his mother's relationship and their love for each other, and not and sort of not giving Jack that redemption moment of helping defeat the villain and having a brief moment of
Of like
resolution with
yeah.
his son or whatever, and like waving as he vanishes into the sunset or whatever, I think makes a lot of sense. I
would tend to agree.
Okay. Anyways, okay. Was that all my questions? Was there anything else?
Well, I didn't talk about Danny dying.
Oh yeah,
yet.
does Danny die in the?
He does not.
Okay.
None of the good guys die in the book. They all live. Only members of the True Knot die.
Okay.
And I'm
Stephen King is just like writing happy stories over here, and Flanagan was like,
yeah.
no.
I'm glad you asked this though, because I didn't really have a good place to put it, because I don't think it's really better or worse. I think that with the way the movie went, I'm not sure how Danny would have explained himself out of taking a teenage girl whose father was just murdered across the country. So like probably a good thing that he just died.
Yeah.
You know, all things considered,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how they would have talked their way out of that
I'm not
one.
sure. And I think it does resolve his story in a satisfying way. Like it feels, and also because the message at the end of this film being, and not the message, but like with this film resolves, it's not like, at the end of this film, death is only the beginning, to
Right.
quote the Mummy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like this is, he dies, but he's still able to be, because you said at the end of the book, he kind of ends up becoming a mentor for Abra.
Yes.
He's able to still do that in this film
as
Ghost
Danny
instead of physical
Astral plane Danny.
Yeah, but I think sacrificing himself to destroy the Overlook and put an end to that whole saga, I think, or that whole.
Yeah, well, and I think that dovetails nicely too with not giving Jack Torrance a redemptive arc, because Danny has done the work.
Yeah.
To overcome
8
his
years
inner
of it
demons.
In Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah.
So it is fitting that he would be able to return to the Overlook, and that the Overlook would not defeat him, but that he would defeat it.
Exactly. Absolutely. I think perfectly put. I think that is a very I think the way the movie takes it makes a lot of sense and works really well. Again, for the movie, and again tying back to the movie version of The Shining. So I think it works. All right, I have a handful of questions for Lost in Adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
Quick one, I just wanted to know if there was any expansion on, I was a little confused, I just wanted some more info. Dick Halloran shows up to Danny when he's young and is like, hey, you can put ghosts in boxes in your brain. And I was like, what is happening? And I wanted to know if it's expanded on in the book. Does he put the bathtub ghost? I assumed this is what was implied when he like walks into the bathroom when he's a little kid. And then the bathtub ghost is in there, and then he comes out and then she's not, and then he's like, all right, I'm good. And then it's like, okay, he can just, what is I was just a little like, I wasn't exactly sure what we were getting at here. And I wanted to know if that was expanded on in the book in any way that was helpful.
So first off, like kind of a side note initially. So after the incident with Mrs. Massey being in the bathtub in their apartment, like having like followed them from the Overlook, basically, Dick Halloran does come to see Danny.
Yeah.
And he actually like comes there like physically, because I feel like the movie kind of implied that maybe he wasn't actually there that he was like astral projecting or was a ghost or something.
He is a ghost because Jack kills him in the film.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Which I guess maybe he doesn't die in the book. I
No,
don't
he doesn't
remember.
die in the book.
Okay.
Okay.
So yes, in the film
He
he's
does
a
die.
ghost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he is a ghost.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Because
then.
yeah, right. I'm like 99% sure Jack Torrance puts an axe through his
Yeah, I think
through
so.
his chest or something in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So he comes back to talk to Danny and he teaches him how to make, he tells him this like whole long backstory about like his experience growing up with The Shining, and then he gives him this locked box and teaches him how to make the same box in his mind that he can use to contain these ghosts when they come after him. And the initial physical box is just to help Danny like visualize what he needed to create in his head.
Okay.
So yes, he does lock the ghosts in the boxes in his mind.
That's what I figured, and it became more clear. I wrote this question at the very beginning, and it became more clear as the film went on. We kept seeing the boxes in the maze.
Yeah.
And stuff. Like I was
And
like,
I
okay.
liked the way that the movie visualized them all in the maze, and they ended up looking kind of like coffins,
Yeah.
like sitting out in the snow and the mist.
Yeah. Eventually, it made more and more sense as the film went on. Like I said, I wrote this kind of early, but it was just a little bit like, what's happening? What's going on here? But yeah, that makes sense. So then in the film, after Danny's, we cut to Danny being an adult, and he wakes up in that house with that girl who's like passed out, and then she has a baby there, and he like throws up, and then he's like stumbling around, and it seems like it was hard to tell what was happening. And I think what the movie is going for is that he's like blacking out, but then he just ends up in New Hampshire, and I wasn't sure if we were watching this from the perspective of someone who's blacking out, and then I didn't know if he was in, because we never get an explanation if he's intentionally going to New Hampshire or like where he just ends up in New Hampshire after we watch him like black out a handful of times, and I was like, what is happening? Like, I don't know. And I think the point is that we're not supposed to really, like, he's just kind of aimlessly wandering as he like, and he's still an alcoholic, so he's just like getting blackout drunk every night or whatever. And then like kind of just we're like kind of going in and out of consciousness ish with him. But I was just confused at what was transpiring and what his goal was or where he was going or what was going on. I didn't understand initially what was transpiring.
So when the story gets to adult Dan, the book, it's pretty close to what we see in the movie, just way more fleshed out. We see like the incident with like he wakes up next to the passed out girl, her baby is there. He takes the money, he gets on a bus, and he just like goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he thinks he might get in trouble for the bar fight.
Okay. See, I didn't necessarily put that together.
And it's interesting, like, while you were talking about, like, oh, the movie was trying to show us that he was, like, blacking out and everything. And I was thinking about, when you were talking about that, how this is one of the ways that it's sometimes hard for me to, like, suss out what a filmmaker might be trying to do. Because to me, it's just a truncated version of the longer version of what happened in the book. And, like, it's sometimes hard to read, like, anything other than, oh, they wanted to shorten it.
Yeah. Well,
but I think that's an interesting like read on.
Yeah, because he keeps like waking up like in like random places, and and we don't know what he's doing. Like there's no we're not in his head. There's no voiceover telling us where he's going or what he's doing. I didn't know if he already had a job or like when he wakes up in that room and then like. Again, because the movie, and again, to the movie's credit, it just doesn't spoon feed you stuff. So I just wasn't sure, like, does he have a job? Is he, when he opens his wallet and he doesn't have any money? Is it money that's missing? What is he mad at? There was so many things that I just, like, the movie doesn't tell you. You're just, like, trying to piece together. And then on top of that, he keeps, like, he'll just, like, wake up and you're like, what's going on now? Like, he's just under an overpass and I don't know. And then I was like, okay, I'm piecing. And again, I think the point of what the movie's doing is you're kind of piecing it together as the movie goes. But I was just a little initially confused of like, and then he wakes up under an overpass. Okay, now he's on a bus, but where is he going on this bus? Does he have a goal in mind? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I have no idea. And then he just ends up in New Hampshire and he's just like there. And I'm like, was he going here for a purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of my question is, was he intending to go to New Hampshire, or was he literally just like aimlessly this is, I guess, what my question boils down to. Was he intentionally going to New Hampshire, and what we're seeing in the movie, the weird sort of like in and out of conscious, blacking out, waking up thing, just a result of him being an alcoholic, and the movie kind of going on that journey with him of like getting from point A to point B while being an alcoholic? Or is he literally just aimlessly wandering and just ends up in New Hampshire? Did he intentionally go to New Hampshire for some reason?
No.
Or does he just kind of end up there because he's just like
he
wandering?
Ends up there. He's wandering.
Okay.
He leaves her apartment. He was upset because there was money missing from his wallet because he just got paid and now he doesn't have any money.
Okay.
And he leaves her apartment and then he goes on like a 3-day bender and wakes up under an overpass.
Yeah.
And then he's like, he had a job, but now he doesn't have a job.
See, I didn't even know if he had a job or not.
He wasn't at his job for 3 days.
Okay.
And he's like, well, I might get in trouble for the bar fight and I don't have a job or anywhere to go anyway, so I guess I'll just get on this bus.
Okay.
And he gets on the bus and goes, and he ends up in New Hampshire.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that all makes sense. And then, yeah, that totally makes sense. I just, like I said, the movie, I feel like if I were reading it in a book, I would know what was happening because I'd be reading the narration of what is happening.
Know what was happening.
In the film, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. But again, I think it works because we're watching it. We're watching through kind of the perspective of a character who is in and out of sobriety, not in sobriety. Who's just like in and out of being completely blacked out drunk and being completely hungover. And so it's just like this back and forth teeter totter of like, and we just kind of like stumbling through it with him in a way that's very disorienting. And I think that works. But that being said, while it's happening, I'm like, what is happening? I don't know what's going on. And I didn't know why he was going where he was going, or if there was a purpose, or you know what I mean? And so I'm just like, and he ends up in New Hampshire. I'm like, okay, I guess this is where we are now. Like, I don't know why we got here or what led us here or whatever. But fair enough. Okay. But I guess the other part of that was like, I also was wondering if maybe he was sort of being psychically pushed,
like pulled to this town, New Hampshire,
without the movie ever saying anything like that.
Not an indication that I ever got that he was being like pulled there by anything. Although the book definitely does that kind of like divine providence, so you ended up where you were supposed to be kind of thing. Okay. But not in a way that implies like there was anything specific like coaxing him there or pulling him there.
Okay. And that's kind of, I was never like getting any sort of vibe that like any like character or any like conscious motivating force was pushing him there, more so just like the weird psychic machinations of the universe or whatever, kind of putting him in this place. Okay. And then my last question here is if we get any backstory on the cult of the True Knot, or what their deal is. Where do they come from? Are they vampire? Like what? I mean, we see them turn Andy into one of them by feeding her steam, basically, and that like turns you into a steam vampire, I guess. is what it seemed like.
yeah, basically.
And I want to know if there's any extra backstory on them in the book.
A little bit, not very much. We know that they've been around like basically forever. Okay. Wandering nomadic steam vampires. No explanation of how they came into being. I do want to mention that the book is potentially a bit iffy here. One of the descriptors that keeps coming back is that they used to travel in caravans across Eastern Europe, which to me implied the Romani people, a historically villainized group of people. Yep. They also keep saying that they used to travel on camels across the desert, right? Implying like Arabic people, another historically villainized group of people,
like nomadic people of like the northern Sahara.
So I don't know why we had to come to those two specifically over and over.
Yeah, that's like Stephen King's 90 years old, and like those are his cultural touchstones for like wandering people. It's like what it is.
I just wanna put that out there. I do think it made me a little uncomfortable. Like, why do we have to go to these two?
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah.
Other people wander.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see. Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, Stephen King's an 80-year-old white guy.
Especially like it was the allusions to the Romani people was what bothered me really like quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because then you're getting into like accusations of witchcraft and like child eating.
It very much plays into
and the
like
true
a lot
not
of the
literally eat children.
Yeah, it plays into a lot of already pre-existing prejudices about Romani people and stuff of like, yeah, they wander through the countryside like abducting your children and like yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it definitely some problematic implications there for sure. All right, I'm done talking. Katie, what was better in the book?
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
Okay, so we talked about a lot of things already, so I'm just going to run through a couple things real quick. When Mrs. Massey's ghost initially appears in their bathroom in their apartment, she's actually literally there, and we know this because Wendy sees bits of her dead flesh in the bathroom, which I thought was disgusting. I retched upon reading it, but cool detail. The scene with the girl that he wakes up passed out drunk next to, and then her kid was, again, pretty accurate if truncated, but I enjoyed the way that it was fleshed out in the book. We see that in the book that her son has, like, bruises on his arm, and then when Danny picks him up, he, like, gets, like, a psychic, like knowledge that the little boy's uncle abuses him, and then later on we find out that, he eventually killed him.
Yeah.
Like ends up killing him.
Huh.
And this is something like this guilt of not having done anything about that, even though he knew that it was happening, is something that follows Danny like throughout the book.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
It's an interesting thematic through line.
Yeah.
So in the movie, when we meet Snakebite Andy in the movie theater, she's watching Casablanca, which I understand like the illusion of that, I guess, but in the book she's watching an Indiana Jones movie, which I think is way more fun.
Well, I mentioned this and I never got back to it, but I thought it was a little funny in the movie that the inference that I got was that she is like luring pedophiles, and this guy comes to meet her at this movie, and he thinks she's underage, but she asked him to come to watch Casablanca, and she's supposed to be like 15. It was just a weird movie choice for like, did this pedophile think a 14-year-old was like, I would like to go see Casablanca? I don't know. It just, in 2019.
Maybe it's supposed to just be that there's not really many people there, was the idea, that like not many people would be going to see. I think a fair number of people would be.
Maybe, I don't know. I just thought it was the whole thing.
But that scene in the book happens like in the 80s. So they're actually at like an Indiana Jones movie like in its original run. And I thought that was more fun. I also don't like Casablanca. So.
Okay, fair enough. I've not seen it though.
Helen Rivington is supposed to be an actual train. I don't know why I was so offended by this. But it's a train. It runs on tracks. It's not like in the movie it's like a little cart. It's like a golf cart thing with like a tram, like at Grant's farm. I don't know how to describe it, but I was offended by it. It's a train.
What is that? I don't know what this is.
The train in Teeny Town that Billy drives.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I see what you're saying.
It's not as big of a part of the story as it is in the book, so I understand that they didn't want to build a whole miniature train set that was actually rideable, but the description of it was pretty cool. And I thought it was
so it's
neat.
like a little miniature train.
Yeah, it's like a small train, but it's like big enough.
What the hell is the Helen Rivington? Like why would you say that? Like I know what the Helen Rivington. I was like, what are we talking about?
I'm sorry, I forgot that they never.
Maybe they do, but I wouldn't remember. You would have to be like, the little. I remember there being a little train in the teeny town thing, but that is such a small part of the film. It's like in like one scene. I was like, the hell in Rivington? I don't know what we're talking about. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, the moment where he sees the corpse of Deanie and her son, I thought was more horrific in the book. The description of it was just. Sorry, Deanie is the woman that he wakes up next to when he's drunk at the beginning of the movie.
Dead?
She is eventually. Yes. She's not dead when he wakes up next to her, but then later on he's visited by her ghost.
Oh, in the book. Okay.
Yes, in the book. And we see that briefly in the movie.
Do we?
Yes, he wakes up and there's like initially right after he gets to New Hampshire, he wakes up and there's like a hand stretched across him.
I did not realize that's what that was.
Yeah, it's supposed to be her and her baby.
Together.
So the description of it is
Okay.
extremely horrific in the book. And she also warns him about Rose the Hat in the book. She warns him to stay away from the one with the hat because she'll eat him alive.
I forgot about that moment with that character because I did not realize, or with that ghost or whatever, like when he wakes up, I did not realize what that was. I thought it was just like a random, like I thought that was like a vision of like a previous tenant who like lived and died in the, you know what I mean?
I can understand why you
That's what
think
I
that,
thought that was. Okay.
But no.
I did not realize that's what that was at all.
Yeah. The first part of this movie, all of the establishing stuff was too fast-paced for me. The leisurely pace of the book drove me nuts because I was trying to read fast, but I thought it worked better for the story. Just the whole setup portion of this movie was, for me, it was like bang, 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 and I was like, this is too fast.
Oh, it clearly might have been a little too fast because a lot of these moments you're talking about here, I was not.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, clearly.
I was a little like, what are you talking about? So yeah, there must have been too much going on for, again, part of that is I'm writing notes.
Right.
There's,
yes.
But still,
you can miss small things.
Yeah.
So Abra's great grandmother, Momo, it's mentioned once or twice in the movie that Momo is dying of cancer. Momo is a whole character in the book that we get to know. And I understand that there's a heck of a lot going on, so I understand why the movie cut her character. But I did like her. She was like an ancient, sassy Italian woman who wrote poems, and I liked her.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take your, I have nothing to add because I don't know. I never saw that character.
The description of cycling, when the True Knot members cycle, I thought sounded cooler in the book. The movie kind of did it accurately, but in the book,
like, rah, 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 rah.
well, in the book, what they describe is that they like different parts of their body systems go in and out of visibility. So so you can
I
have
think the movie kind of does that.
It kind of does that, but it didn't sound as cool. Like at one point, somebody's cycling and there's just like a pair of eyeballs floating in the air, and then they like pop back into their full body pops back.
It doesn't
and then
do that quite
just
as much.
like their skin pops away, and you can see all the muscles.
It
and
does
then,
that.
Yeah, and
The
then
movie
you can
does
see
that.
just their skeleton with the eyes in the sockets.
The movie does that too.
But it doesn't sound as cool.
I'll take your word
It
for it.
sounded
I didn't
cooler
read
in
it,
the
so
book.
but it's definitely what I was kind of. I didn't know what was happening in the film. I just thought they they almost it was like they were glitching or something. I thought it looked cool, and based on what you're saying, that sounds like what I saw in the film. But I'll take your word for it that it's not as cool.
Thank you.
I can't argue with you. I didn't read the book.
Okay, let's talk about the measles plotline because the movie cut that entirely. Now, I am of two minds about this. Okay, so basically this plotline is that when they fed off of Bradley, the baseball boy, they contract measles from him because he was not inoculated to measles and he had it at the time. He just wasn't showing spots or whatever yet.
Yeah.
I think this is a very interesting comeuppance for the True Knot, for them to because they think they're above humans.
Right.
They call humans rubes, and they're like, we're better than them. We're the true not. We're amazing. And they're just cattle, basically.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting kind of
Yeah, like
comeuppance.
a measly little
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
disease.
The phrase "hoisted by your own petard"
Yeah.
also comes up in the book.
Yeah.
Also, though, is it anti-vax? Because, like, it's a good thing he wasn't vaccinated for measles.
Well, but didn't you say he just wasn't yet? Like he just,
Maybe that's fair. Maybe he just wasn't yet. I don't know.
I think you get the measles vaccine pretty young.
I think you do too.
Like as a baby, basically.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, it could be. Yeah,
I don't
guess
think it is.
No,
like I don't think that's what Stephen
based
King
on
is
what I know of
trying
Stephen
to say.
King, I don't think that's the
but
case.
I did have that thought while I was reading that. I was like, oh, you could definitely read it that way.
Don't get vaccinated, so if you get eaten by energy vampires, they will die of whatever communicable diseases you
Listen. Anti-vaxxers believe all kinds of funky shit.
You're not wrong.
This is not out of the realm of possibility.
You're not wrong. Well, you said you were of two minds about this. Oh, was it?
Those were the two minds. I thought it was an interesting plot line. I thought it was an interesting comeuppance. But then I was like, could it be read as anti-vax?
Okay.
I think it could be.
Because I when you said that, I thought you were going to go a different direction with it, with your sort of negative read on it, being that it makes sense to not include that in the film just because it's...
No, it does. I understand why
like,
it's not in the film. It's too clunky to explain.
Yeah, it's too clunky to explain, and it kind of takes away from the overall story we're telling a little bit. So that was where I thought you were going with it.
Movies have to streamline things. I understand that.
And and it's just of the things, it's just what do we? Because we got to have our protagonists kill them anyway. It makes
right.
So having them be die. I mean, they are dying in the film, but they're just dying because they don't have enough steam.
Yeah.
As opposed to having measles.
Right. Which is another thing that they talk about in the book. They do talk about how there used to be more people with steam.
Yeah.
Which is also interesting because the book kind of floats this hypothesis that steam or the shining might be hereditary. So by culling off every child who has steam, they have essentially starved themselves into a corner.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Yeah, I think that makes. Yeah, I think because that's definitely the angle the movie kind of goes. I think a little bit, and I think that makes more sense because then you don't have to explain. And I think audiences might just be like, measles, they're dying. What? It would just be. I feel like it would just be hard again in a short film in a relatively compared to a 500 600 page book short film to explain the measles subplot and not have it come across as just kind of silly.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay.
It was just something in the book that interested me.
Yeah, no, it like I said, it is interesting. I think there's an interesting angle to it for sure. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
I liked that the movie started off with Rose and the True Knot. I thought that was a really good setup of what they were, and showed us what to expect of them. I appreciated.
You mean when they go and they abduct Violet or whatever?
Violet, right at the beginning of the movie, because the movie does not start with them. We don't meet them until, the book doesn't start with them. We don't meet them until a little ways in.
Yeah, I agree.
I appreciated that the book cut short Dick Halloran's story about growing up with Shining, because it was this very long, horrific story about how his grandfather used to sexually abuse him. Very hard to read. Appreciated losing that.
Good.
I was also totally fine with skipping everything where newborn Abra predicts 9/11. That was the hokiest part of the whole book to me. I was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Maybe that read less hokey in 2013? I don't think so.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I gotta know. How does the
Okay,
newborn
so-
Abra predicts 9/11? I have to know. I was gonna let it, but I can't. I have to know.
So shortly after Abra is born, both of her parents have these horrific nightmares on the same night where they're running around in like a burning building, and they can hear her screaming and crying, but they can't find her. And then when they do find her, she has like numbers written on her chest. And then like the next day, 9/11 happens, and the numbers that were on her chest in the dreams were the numbers of the flights
my
that
God.
hit the towers.
Oh my god. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. It's definitely, if you're playing with fire when you
Yeah.
when you start doing stuff like that. It's it's definitely one of those things where it has to be done well.
Well, and the weird thing about its inclusion in the book is that it doesn't end up meaning anything. Like it doesn't go anywhere. It's just
Well,
like,
it's
and it's just an example of how
her,
powerful she is.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, and I don't think that I don't think like 9/11's off limits for stuff like that. I think you could totally do it. I just think that I think less so than being offensive, it just comes across as like
Hokey.
and
Yeah.
like what? Okay, like it's just one of those things where it's like, and I think you would even get that, and I don't know a better way to do it, but because I get the idea of like trying to use some like big world event that audiences are familiar with in order to like establish this character's like psychic ability or whatever.
Yeah.
And so 9/11 seems like it's a big thing that
Right.
everybody
It's
knows
a big
about.
thing everybody is going to be at least vaguely familiar
Yeah,
with.
and so you can kind of use that, but it does. It's like it's just like like it's just, and it's also because 9/11, especially in recent years, 9/11 has become, for better or worse, it has become memeified in a way that is like it's hard to like incorporate it in your story
in a
without
serious
it feeling,
way.
yeah, in a serious way without it feeling, unless that's literally the point of the story. Like, unless the story is about like something to do related to 9/11 or whatever, incorporating it as like just an offhand plot element is like it's very strange.
Yeah.
And hard to do.
I agree.
So, anyways,
I put the book down and said to you, a newborn baby just predicted 9/11 in this book.
Yes, he did.
Okay. I mentioned earlier a character named Casey, who in the book is the one that runs the AA meetings and initially gets Dan a job and a place to live. He's not in the movie. His character kind of gets parceled into Billy and Dr. John, which I think makes a lot of sense. No reason to have a third character there. When Abra and Rose initially like swap perspectives, like go into each other's minds, they do this a couple times in the book and they call it turning the table or like turning the wheel, I think. And they kind of explain it as like if you're standing, like two people are standing on either end of a giant turntable, and then it like shifts like this table on the astral plane. I thought the way the movie visualized that was fucking sick.
Yeah. No, all the
really
stuff
cool.
with that in the film is very cool.
I preferred that the ghost of Dick Halloran just showed up at the hospice to talk to Dan. In the book, he like inhabits the body of someone who's in the hospice and like speaks through a corpse. Just have him be there.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Yeah, especially because in the movie,
have him be there.
Particularly works in the movie because we've already seen his ghost earlier.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
Because he is dead. Whereas in the book, then I guess when he's speaking through the corpse, he's still alive, or is he dead at that point?
He's dead at that point because we've jumped far enough forward.
Okay. Yeah.
He's been dead for a while at that point, I think. So when Abra's dad finds out what's going on and he's like trying to pour a glass of whiskey and is just shaking like crazy.
Yes.
It's just a
Very
little
relatable.
moment.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, same, bro.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah, absolutely.
I liked that it was literally just Rose left at the end. Like I mentioned, at the end of the climax in the book, there are still several members of the True Knot left.
Yeah.
And I thought that the movie made a good choice to just have it be her.
Yeah.
Especially since they travel to the Overlook and she's not just already there. Also, the book does this whole thing where like Abra's great grandmother died and Dan helps her like cross over, but then she like gives him her last breath of death steam,
Yes.
and then when he gets there he like unleashes it on the members of the True Knot and it kills them, and I was like, I don't know if this all pans out, but sure.
Yeah.
So I thought that was wise to just kind of
Yeah.
get
Just
rid
kill
of
her
that.
rail stuff. Yeah.
And I did think that for all the kind of issues that we had with the climax of the film at the Overlook, it was definitely cooler than the climax in the book.
I can imagine. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, issues aside, I still liked it overall.
Yeah.
It just had some issues that I thought weren't the best. So, all right, let's talk about a few things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Just a couple things that we haven't already talked about and discussed to death. Mrs. Massey in the bathroom after they've left the Overlook. Nailed that.
Yep.
Abra hanging spoons off the ceiling.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly as it happened
That
in
was
the
a
book.
cool scene. I liked that.
Jumping around between all of the different, like jumping from Dan and then to Abra and then to the True Knot and kind of jumping back and forth. That's exactly what the book does. The story where Dan knows where Dr. John's watch is.
Oh, yeah.
Where he's like, oh, you left it on the sink, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That happens in the book. It's slightly different, but
I thought
close enough.
I thought that was weird in the film. I actually was going to mention that because he just like outs himself as psychic to
it is
Dr.
a little
John.
weird.
And I was like, wait, what?
It's a little different contextually in the book, which it is a little odd in the movie, but it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
We talked about Azzy the cat,
Yep.
who knows when one of the hospice patients is going to pass, despite not being gray. Azzy is still the same character. And then everything with the baseball boy, basically spot on.
All right, let's talk about a few odds and ends before we get to the final verdict. I was really impressed with how much I thought that actress playing Shelley Duvall, or playing Wendy, looked like Shelley Duvall, particularly in the first scene. I thought in later scenes she looked less.
Well, here's what I thought when
like
she
her.
had her hair down, like when her hair was down, incredible likeness to Shelley Duvall.
Yeah.
When she had her hair
up.
pulled back in the ponytail, I was like less so.
Yeah.
I can tell you're not Shelley Duvall right now.
Yeah. There was a couple of moments where I thought she specifically really looked like if you crossed Shelley Duvall with Winona Ryder. I was like there was this one shot in particular where I was like, wow, she looks a lot like Shelley Duvall. And then the next shot, I was like, actually, she looks like Shelley Duvall and Winona Ryder like mixed together. Like, it was really interesting. But impressively like her.
Yeah.
More so than I think anybody other than, which was my next note, other than Dick Halloran.
Mm-hmm.
The guy they got to play Dick Halloran, who was played by Scatman Carruthers in the original.
Yeah.
Holy cow, I thought he looked a lot like in general.
I was pretty impressed with how many like very, very close look-alike
I didn't
actors
think
they
Danny
found.
or like Danny's hair did, but I didn't think the actor playing Dan, like the little kid Danny, or the actor playing Jack particularly looked super, like they looked good enough for it to work for the film.
Yeah.
But they didn't look as close to me as the other two did. Like I thought Shelley Duvall, or the actors playing Shelley Duvall and the actors playing Scatman Carruthers' characters, I thought they both looked a lot like, whereas the other two were like less so. But I mean, still very impressive overall, and again, all of them enough to
Yeah.
sell the illusion and make
Well,
it just
and
kinda work.
especially Shelley Duvall, because Shelley Duvall is so distinctive looking.
Yes.
Like, I
Yeah.
was very impressed that they managed to find somebody who
Yeah.
looked enough like her that I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
you look a lot like Shelley Duvall.
And I will say, I think it works too, specifically for Lloyd the bartender, that guy didn't look quite
Yeah.
as perfectly like Jack Nicholson. In that moment, I think it would have been distracting for them to like have found a Jack Nicholson impersonator,
Right.
and for him to be doing like his best
Jack
Jack Nicholson impersonation.
Yeah.
I think would have been distracting, but I also think because it would have come across just like, all right. But I also think it works in that scene because the character in that moment is, insistent that they are not.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think it works
I'm
because
Lloyd the bartender.
right. Because unlike where like with Wendy, it is supposed to be Wendy.
Right.
But with that, like with Jack, it's not
like a
really
ghost.
him.
Yeah,
it's like
a ghost who is
twisted
him.
mirror world version
Yeah.
of him.
Yeah. Like it is him, but it's not. Yeah. In a way that, I think the fact that it's a little bit off kind of works and makes sense.
Yeah.
There's that one scene where I was like, I figured out how I want to die, and it's in hospice with a cat sitting on my feet and Ewan McGregor singing to me. Like, what a way to go. These people really, really lucked out when they checked into that hospice.
My last note here, we both made a comment on this. When they were digging up the baseball boy,
Yes.
we were like, well, they buried him in a very shallow grave.
Well, and the movie, one of the Billy, I think, somebody in the film comments on how shallow of a grave
very
it is.
shallow grave.
Well, and it's particularly funny because we get like a couple cuts of like time has passed and they've been digging, and then it's like 3 inches under the ground. I was like, why would you do the time lapse like they've been digging forever? And then he's like, right, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny too. But yeah, absolutely. It's very shallow grave. All right, before we wrap up and get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us for a few bucks a month there. Get access to some bonus content and other stuff. Also, you can do us a giant favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads, any of the social media platforms. Follow us, interact. We'd love to hear what you have to say about all of our episodes, and we read your feedback and talk about it on our prequel episodes. And if you support us on Patreon at the highest $15 level, you get priority recommendations, which this is one of those. Katie, who recommended that we talk about this.
This was recommended by our dear friend Shelby.
Yes, indeed. Shelby, thank you for recommending Dr. Sleep. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterward.
I've gone back and forth on this since watching the film, but I think I have to call this one a draw. As I mentioned, the leisurely pace of the book kind of drove me nuts, mostly because I was trying to read fast and catch up with myself. But I think the expanded nature of the book works better for the complex, multi-layered nature of the story. We also get to know all of the characters really well, which I also think works better. Like you mentioned, Billy being immediately ride or die and willing to go dig up a grave in Iowa with very little prompting, but the characters' ready involvement with Abra and Dan's insane-sounding situation feels a lot more natural in the book because the book puts in a lot of work building characters and relationships that the movie just doesn't have time for. Now, that being said, I think that this movie did an astonishing job of adapting a book that is a sequel to a book with a much more famous film adaptation that made a lot of changes to its source material. And despite the truncated storyline, the movie still works, and it works well. I think that for a lot of people, what this comparison might boil down to is what kind of story you prefer. The book takes things at a leisurely pace and is almost more of a sprawling fantasy, exploring the paths of two individuals who basically have magic powers and the similarly powered bad guys who come after them. The movie is faster paced and squares things a bit more into the horror realm with a focus on unsettling visuals and incorporating elements from The Shining, the film. I always feel like I'm copping out a bit by calling a draw, but these two really did come up equal for me personally.
All right. It's a draw. Katie, what's up next?
Well, we're supposed to be on hiatus right now,
Yes.
but we're not because I'm a failure of a human being.
That's not true.
But so there's not going to be an episode next week.
Yeah.
That was what was supposed to be our second week off because we're getting married this weekend.
Hey.
By the time you're listening to this, this episode's coming out on Wednesday. We're getting married Saturday.
Yeah.
And then we're taking a week off from recording after that. I have some posts scheduled to re-promote our previous spooky season episodes.
Yep.
So if you want to revisit some of those, that'll be easy for you to do.
And I'm still figuring out, we may release a patron feed episode in the main feed at some point. I'm not sure yet.
And we're still going to do a couple bonus episodes on Patreon.
They're just going to be a bit late.
They're just going to be a bit later than we initially wanted to do them because at this point, I'm not dealing with that before the wedding. We can do that after the wedding.
We're doing that after the
I'm
wedding.
not dealing with it.
Yeah. And luckily, the two bonus episodes we were going to do, we mentioned it before, but it was Hellboy and Crimson Peak. While we were kind of doing them for Halloween, they're not necessarily like Halloween movies, so it's fine. We'll just do them. Yeah.
We will get those out, and we will return to our regular schedule on November 2nd with the prequel to There Will Be Blood / Oil ! Is the name of the book.
The book is just called Oil?
Yes. The book,
okay. I thought
the movie is There Will Be Blood.
I mean, I know the movie is There Will Be Blood. I thought what you were writing here was that the movie is There Will Be Blood and the book was There Will Be Oil. And I was like, okay, they just changed it, but no, it's just Oil.
No, it's just Oil ! It's by Upton Sinclair. Who I have never read a full text by. I'm pretty sure I read an excerpt of The Jungle in a history class once.
Yeah.
But
that's a movie. We could do that.
Okay, we could.
I'm just saying that's
I'm not ready to become a vegetarian because I found out.
Oh wait,
about the
no. Okay, different book, different. The Jungle. I know what you're talking about. That's a different jungle. There is there's a more recent film called The Jungle that is also based on a book. But it's not that. It's not Upton Sinclair. It's based on there's a film called The Jungle starring Daniel Radcliffe that came out in like 2017 that is based on like an account of a person who got like lost. It's like a true story about like a person who got like
getting lost
trapped in the jungle or something like that. I thought that, and I was like, I didn't think that was Upton Sinclair, but
yeah, sure, we can do that.
Different thing. Anyway, sorry, different thing entirely. Not
Upton Sinclair.
Yes,
we'll do a whole segment on him.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so there you go. Come back for There Will Be Blood / Oil, or rather come back for the prequel to that. And look out where, like I said, there may be, I think potentially next week, a bonus episode from Patreon releasing in the main feed for everybody, kind of as a filler. I just don't know what it's going to be yet. It'll be something, but once we decide what it's going to be, I'll look out for that. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.